Okay, so the next the next service I'm going to talk about is the EC2, which is Elastic Compute Cloud. So EC2 is one of the very popular and one of the first few services that AWS came up with, and it revolutionized the IT industry because it's basically giving you a virtual machine in the cloud, and it's on demand because you can go to the console or you can use CLI, create a EC2 instance, log into it, do some work, and then you can stop it. So that you and they introduce the model of pay as much as you use, right? So if you're not using, you don't have to keep the VM running. EC2 instance is nowadays, so it's since it's in back all those years, the type of EC2 instances, it has increased a lot. So initially there were very few, but now if you can see, there are different categories, and there is a link I've provided. It gives details on each which type of instance it is, but basically an instance has key features, which is it has to have a CPU, so which is what with CPUs 1, 2, 4 and higher, and memory, which is various type of gigabits of RAM. Storage is two types, EBS and EFS. EBS is the elastic block storage, which can be attached to each EC2 instance, and EFS is the files storage, which is basically kind of NFS, which can be mounted on your EC2 instance. So EFS, if it's mounted, it works like an NFS, like a service, file sharing service. It's not dedicated to the EC2. It can be shared with multiple EC2. So normally in Kubernetes clusters, it's used. Network card will decides the speed, of the EC2 instance, and IPs like public versus private. And then the security group is a very important part. The EC2 instance, once it's created, it usually comes with a default security group. Security group gives the ingress and egress access to the EC2 instance, and by default security groups have everything is denied. It can only allow, and inbound is all blocked. We have to create inbound rules to allow access. And the EC2 can also have initial some data scripts to launch the instance. These are called the bootstrapping. So you can add some initial script, like you can add packages, update packages before the instance starts. So let me go to the console over here. So if you can see, let me go to the EC2 dashboard. So I have a couple of EC2. I don't have an instance running, but I have 3 EC2 instances. And this was as part of setting up my own Kubernetes cluster. So I will just go to the first instance ID. They're stopped because when I'm not using, I don't want to have it up and running. So slowly, we can go in the detail of VPC subnet. But if you see over here, this is a basic T2 instance, which is, it has number of vCPUs is 4. And each instance, these are general details. It has an AMI, which is the Amazon machine image. So it's a Linux based instance, so I'm using this AMI. And then in addition to that, it uses a key pair to log in, so I'm using my own key pair, but because if I want to SSH to it and do some stuff, I need that. In security, as I was saying, security group, these are some of the security groups, right? So there's a default security group that came when I created the instance, and this has inbound rules and outbound rules. So right now I have not allowed any inbound. If you see traffic, I'm not allowing any SSH, but if we want to create, like for example, so you can simply go, instead of all traffic, I can pick SSH. So SSH is always port 22. I can allow the SSH and I can create a rule. So now I can allow from either one of the security groups, which means that, let's say I want to, I already allow my inbound to one of the public EC2 instances, then I can, through that security group, I can SSH instead of directly opening to 00, or I can also do my IP. So then it will only allow to create to in SSH. But without having this rule, I will not be able to SSH into the EC2 instance. So I will go later in more detail on the security groups, because I have created a few and then I can show the difference of each one of them. Similarly, we have outbound. So outbound is basically all traffic, whatever goes from the instance to outside. So I have allowed IPv4 and IPv6 because I was creating clusters using both. But generally, the IPv4 all traffic is always allowed, and when you create an EC2 instance. So the important thing next is to explore. So this is this is an ongoing diagram that will keep on I will keep on adding stuff. So we start with EC2, right, to access to inbound and outbound from the user. It's on the cloud. We have a security group, and so then I will go in the detail of this security group and EC2, and then slowly we'll explore, we'll add, there is a VPC, there are subnets, and then additional is a load balancer. There are private versus public subnets, and then there is a network control list, right? So that also we will be exploring. Okay, so let's do a deep dive a little bit on the EC2 instances. So in my console, I have three EC2 instances because I set up the Kubernetes cluster manually myself. So I had a master and two workers, but I just started the master. So how I did, I go to the console and I did an instance state. I can stop, I can start and reboot. So I right now started it, and let's look at my EC2 instance. So the EC2 instance has an instance ID. It has a public IPv4 address and a private IPv4. So public IPv4 address is anybody, if I have the right security group from, let's say, my machine or anybody on the internet to SSH or access my instance, I will be able to, and it will use the public. It's exposed to the internet. Private IPv4 is only within that particular network. So there is a private subnet and there should be a public. So any instance that needs to be exposed has to be either in a public subnet, or it has to have a internet gateway and NAT gateway to be able to talk to the network if it's in a private network. Similarly, there is a public IPv4 DNS which is accessible from outside. There is also something called elastic IP address, which I don't have. So I have elastic IP can be obtained, and in one account you can have 5. So I have one elastic IP. So I have not assigned it right now, but it's an IP. If I want, I can allocate to my EC2 instance. So the only thing is that in an elastic IP, the IP will not change. So right now, if you see, it's a public IP, right? So right now it's 54.172.133. If I stop it and then I restart it, a new IP address, whatever is available in the pool, will get associated with this instance. So let's come back to this picture. I updated it a little bit. So we initially had an EC2 and there was a security group. So I named it security group 1, and then I have laid down a public subnet. So my first EC2 instance, it's inside a public subnet. And there outside of that there is a VPC, virtual private cloud, right? And there is let's say another EC2 instance that I'm going to create, which can have its own security group, but it can share, because security group just defines the inbound and outbound rules. So I can have SG1 or I can have SG2, right? It doesn't matter, but it is inside a private subnet. So the private subnet for access it has to have a NAT gateway, and then this is inside a VPC. So let me show you two instances. So these are my 5 subnets as of now. So this is the EC2 instance that I'm just connecting to. It wasn't 0. This one, if you see my EC2 instance that is running, that's the subnet ID 057. So if you look at this subnet ID 057, this is my subnet. It has CIDR range, and now it has a routing table. So let's look at the routing table, I think, from here. So if you look at the routing table, it defines the routes. Anything going outside the destination, which is outside, is through an internet gateway. So that is it's a public subnet. So that's what it's over here, right? So this, from here, it will use the internet gateway. It has to route anything outside. And then now if we say, let's look at a private. So let's look at a private subnet. So this is a private workers. So let's say this one. So this is a private subnet. So the difference over here is, you will see that this, how would you differentiate is, anything going outside has to go through a NAT gateway. Okay, so now let me go back to the my EC2 instance. So my EC2 instance, the one we were that one is running. It has two security groups attached to it, and I want to SSH to it. Let it go to security. So this one, the first one is a default security group. It doesn't have any inbound rules. If you can see here, it doesn't have anything related to SSH opening, because I will have to open up SSH from my computer, otherwise I won't be able to SSH. So then I have another security group where I have a row. So let's see, I just go cancel it. Now if I try to SSH, so simple is, if you go to EC2, and this is my running instance, and there is something called connect. So if you look at this one, it will it's damn slow. Okay, so there is a way, there is something called connect. So I'm going to use the SSH client, and I have a PEM key generated which I'll be using. So I will simply, it gives exactly the step to be able to connect. There is also something called EC2 instance connect, that is kind of like, if you have used Cloud9, it gives a terminal within the browser, kind of that. So but I'm not going to do that, so I'm going to simply do a SSH. I will use my key. I come here and I will do SSH. So the IP address, if you can see, this one that is it's being used is the one which is coming directly from the EC2 instance, this one. So it's the public, right? 133.14. So it's public DNS. So if I do this, I'm able to get in. I have some files here, but basically I am now on the EC2 instance. It's called, I named it Cube Master. You can do that. You set your host name and all that. But so yeah, so that's how you can SSH into your Cube Master. So that's the security group allowed the access. And if I delete the security group where I am allowing port 22 access from my computer, then I will not be able to SSH.